See, sometimes you see a logo and it just clicks, you know?
Mhm.
It's not just some random design. It like represents the whole feel of the brand.
Right.
And we're going to try to unpack that today.
Okay.
And listener name. Since you're starting your own, mention listener's industry business, if possible, from providing context. We thought this would be super relevant.
Yeah, for sure.
Because getting your logo right can make a huge difference.
It really can.
And to help us navigate this visual maze, we've got our expert who eats, sleeps, and breathes design.
It's true.
Basically, they're here to help us understand how these eye-catching logos come to life.
Yeah, happy to break it down. It's a really interesting process, and there's more to it than people realize.
So no surprise here. You want a logo that's going to be memorable, right? And really represent what your brand is all about.
Right.
But where do we even begin?
Right.
Because I was looking at some of the research you sent, and it actually surprised me. It's not about just like sketching out ideas right away.
It's tempting to jump right into the fun, creative stuff.
Right.
But honestly, the most important thing is the foundation we have to really understand the DNA of your brand.
Okay.
Its mission, its values, who you're talking to. It's kind of like building a house. You don't start by picking out the paint color.
Right.
You need to make sure the blueprint is solid first.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you're saying establish that strong foundation of what the brand is.
Exactly.
And then build the visuals around it.
Yes.
Which makes sense, because like a logo for a high-energy gym wouldn't really work for like a meditation app, you know?
Exactly. Those are two totally different vibes we're trying to evoke.
Totally.
So, listener name, when you think about your work in listeners' industry business, what are some words that come to mind? Like if you had to describe the personality of your brand.
Like a designer, it's almost like a brand detective at that point.
Yes.
They're digging into all these keywords, trying to understand not just what you do, but like the how behind it.
Absolutely. And that's where the research gets really interesting. And we start to look at your industry, like what are your competitors doing visually? What are some of the trends? But also, what are some cliches that we need to avoid?
Right, because you don't want to look like everyone else.
Exactly.
It's about being unique.
It's about standing out for the right reasons.
Yes.
And that's where understanding design history can be super helpful.
Okay.
We want your logo to feel fresh and current, but also have a timeless quality.
Right.
Like there's a reason why logos like Coca-Cola or Apple have endured for so long.
Yeah, they've definitely stood the test of time.
Right.
Okay, so we've kind of laid the groundwork now, right? We know what your brand's all about.
Yes.
Now we get to the fun part.
Yes.
Brainstorming.
Brainstorming.
And I love that you call this the playground phase.
Yes, it's where we let loose a little.
Okay.
We explore all kinds of ideas, from really literal representations to more abstract concepts, trying different fonts, playing with shapes, even experimenting with negative space.
Wait, negative space? What's that, like hidden images and logos or something?
Yes, exactly. Negative space is super powerful.
Huh.
Think about the FedEx logo.
Oh,
It seems really simple at first glance, right?
right.
But if you look closely, you'll notice that the E and the X, they create an arrow in the negative space.
Oh my gosh, I never noticed that.
Right.
That's so cool.
It's subtle, but it's really clever because that arrow, it suggests forward movement delivery,
Makes sense.
which are both key parts of FedEx's brand identity.
Wow. Listener name. You have to look this up later if you haven't seen it. It's those little details
Yes.
that make you appreciate the thought that goes into a good logo.
It's about finding those hidden gems that really elevate the design.
So we're playing with negative space.
Yeah.
What's next in this logo playground?
So this is where we start to experiment with color and typography.
Okay.
And listener name, I know you're interested in color psychology.
Yes.
Which is awesome because it's such a fascinating aspect of logo design.
It's so interesting.
Because it's not just about picking colors you like. It's about understanding how those colors can actually influence how people perceive your brand.
I have to admit, I used to think it was just about aesthetics, you know, like just picking what looks pretty together. But then you sent me that research.
Yeah.
And I was blown away by how color can actually impact how people feel about a brand.
It's really powerful stuff. For instance, blue is often associated with trust and stability, which is why it's a popular choice for banks and financial institutions.
Right.
But listener name, you mentioned that your business is all about being eco-friendly, so maybe a nice nature-inspired green would resonate more with your target audience.
Oh, that's a good point.
Right.
So you're already thinking about how these concepts apply to like their specific needs.
Always.
That's awesome. And fonts too.
Right.
Like a delicate script fonts can have a totally different feel than, say, a bold geometric one.
Absolutely every detail contributes to the overall message.
Right.
A script font might be perfect for a high-end boutique, but it probably wouldn't fit with a tech startup that's going for a more cutting-edge vibe.
Right.
So this stage is all about refining those top contenders, experimenting with different color palettes, typography pairings, until we have a few rock star concepts to present.
Okay, so we've gone from brand exploration to like a playground of ideas, and now we're narrowing down to some really strong contenders.
Yes.
But what happens when you actually show these to the client?
Right.
Because I imagine that's where feedback and revisions come in, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a collaborative process at that point.
Okay, so it's not like those design memes where the client just says, make the logo bigger.
Hopefully not, though. Sometimes those seemingly simple requests can actually spark a whole new direction.
Right.
It's all about communication and making sure we're on the same page as the client.
Because ultimately it's their brand, their business.
Right. It's their vision.
Yeah, and that logo needs to represent that.
Exactly. And listener name, even though you have experts guiding you through this process, don't be afraid to speak up. Ask questions. Make sure you're happy with the final design because it's going to represent your brand.
For sure. So they love the direction you're going.
Yeah.
Maybe a few tweaks here and there. What happens once the client gives that final design the green light?
So that's when we move from the creative phase to the more technical side of things.
Okay.
Making sure that your logo is ready for anything.
Okay.
We don't just send over a JPEG and call it a day. We provide you with the whole logo package.
The logo package, what's in that?
So remember how we talked about how a logo needs to work at different sizes?
Yes.
Like sometimes it's going to be on a billboard and sometimes it's going to be tiny on a business card.
Right.
So that's where different file formats come in.
Okay.
You'll get vector files, which you can kind of think of like the blueprint of your logo.
Okay.
They can be scaled to any size without losing any quality.
So no pixelation when it's blown up huge.
Yeah, it's perfect for things like billboards or signage.
Makes sense.
And then you'll also get web-optimized versions, which are smaller file sizes that make sure that your logo loads quickly on a website or social media.
Right, because nobody wants to wait for like a blurry logo to load.
Exactly. Speed and clarity are key.
Gotcha. So vector files, web-optimized versions, anything else in this logo package?
Sometimes we'll also include brand guidelines, which are like a rule book for your logo.
Okay.
It covers things like color variations, maybe a light version and a dark version for different backgrounds, spacing rules just to make sure that it always looks its best.
So it's kind of like you're providing a toolkit to make sure that there's visual consistency as their brand grows.
Exactly, because a logo isn't a static thing, it evolves.
Right, it's got to be able to grow with the brand. And then maybe think about those like really iconic logos, the ones you see and you immediately know what brand it is without even seeing the name.
Right.
Like that Nike swoosh, those golden arches.
Yep.
Do those logos, do you think they start out that strong? Or is it something that's built over time?
It's a little bit of both. I mean,
Yeah.
there are definitely some design principles that can help a logo have that lasting power.
Right.
Like we talked about simplicity, memorability, a strong concept. Those are all important.
Right.
But that iconic status that comes with time
Right.
through consistent use. And of course, you need a great brand behind it.
Like the chicken and the egg.
Yes.
You need a strong brand to support a strong logo, but that logo, in turn, helps build brand recognition.
Exactly. It's a symbiotic relationship for sure.
It's so cool. And listener name, like, don't feel like you need to create the next Nike swoosh right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Focus on crafting a logo that feels authentic to your brand and your values and that connects with the people you're trying to reach.
Yes. And remember those hidden elements we talked about earlier?
Oh, like that FedEx arrow.
Yes, exactly. Things like that can make your logo more memorable and engaging.
What are some other logos that use negative space in really clever ways? Because I'm like hooked on this now.
Well, since we were just talking about food a second ago, have you ever noticed the Toblerone logo?
Yeah, with the mountain.
Yes. So it features the silhouette of a mountain, right? Which is a nod to the brand's Swiss heritage.
Okay.
But if you look closely within that mountain, you'll see the outline of a bear standing on its hind legs.
No way. I've never noticed that.
It's very subtle.
Wow.
But it adds a really cool layer of storytelling because Bern, Switzerland, where Toblerone originated, is actually known for its bears.
Oh, that's so cool. It's like a little Easter egg in the logo.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A fun little detail for those who know where to look.
I love that. And this is why I find design so fascinating.
Yeah.
It's like a visual puzzle.
It's about those layers of meaning.
Yes.
Those subtle cues that create a richer experience for the viewer.
I love it. So we've talked about those timeless logos, the ones that have stayed pretty consistent over the years.
Yeah.
But what about brands that decide to refresh their logos? How does that decision come about?
Yeah.
And how do you maintain that balance between staying current without looking dated in a couple of years?
It's tricky for sure. It's like walking a tightrope between honoring the brand's history and keeping up with the times visually.
So is there a right time for a brand to say, okay, our logo needs a refresh?
Well, there's no magic formula or anything, but there are definitely some signs to look out for. Like maybe your logo just feels really outdated, like it's stuck in the past.
Like those websites with the pixelated gradients?
Exactly. Or maybe your brand has gone through some big changes, like a new mission, a new target audience, but the logo is still stuck in the old ways.
So it's not about changing just for the sake of change. It's more about making sure that your logo still represents who you are as a brand today.
100%. Sometimes a little refresh is all you need. Maybe tweak the colors a bit, update the font, simplify the design a little.
Like a little nip and tuck instead of a full-on makeover.
Exactly, but then there are times when you need a more dramatic redesign to show that the brand is moving in a bold new direction.
Right, like when Airbnb or Instagram changed their logos a few years back.
Right.
But that's risky, right? I mean, what about alienating your loyal customers who love the old logo?
It's a balancing act for sure. That's why it's so important to really do your research and understand your audience, especially when you're thinking about a rebrand.
Hmm.
And it goes back to what we've been talking about, a strong concept and a timeless design. That's what's going to stand the test of time, even with a few updates here and there along the way.
So, listener name, as you're starting to think about your own logo, remember it's not just about a pretty picture.
It's about capturing the soul of your brand.
Exactly. Distilling it down to one memorable mark.
That's a great way to put it. A logo is so powerful, it's often the very first thing a potential customer sees, so you want to make it count.
For sure. Think about those hidden details. The clever uses of negative space. The colors that evoke just the right feeling.
And most importantly, have fun with it. Find a designer who gets you, who understands your vision, and who can bring it to life in a way that you love.
It's about finding that creative partner in crime to make this whole design journey a success. And on that note, listener name, we've covered a ton of ground today. From the importance of brand discovery to the magic of negative space to even a little bit of logo psychology.
We threw a lot of information at you.
What was your biggest takeaway from our deep dive today? What really stuck with you?
What will you be looking at differently from now on?
Keep those questions in mind and keep those creative gears turning. We'll get you in the next one.